And welcome viewers to the Daily Space Weather and to the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. Thanks for tuning in, and frankly we're surprised that you realize that the channel exists as we bring you only the most comprehensive space weather and most detailed imagery of the sun you'll find anywhere in the world. This is the last 24 hours from SDO. And we've got a new major sunspot group rising, a major uptick in the radio flux. We're going to have a major uptick in the sunspot number, a major uptick in solar activity in general, and a large M-class flare, a series of flares, mainly coming from that sunspot in the north. Let's lose the 1700 angstroms and swap it out with 193 angstroms. And also add 304 angstroms. This is great at showing the contrast of filaments. And we indeed have a lot of filaments, some of which need names, so join us on Twitter for that, at Smashomash. Let's take a quick trip around the horn here. Here is your northwestern limb. Again, some large flares coming from that sunspot group at that high northern heliographic latitude. We'll show you some more great imagery of that later in the video. Here's the southwest limb. Hulk Hogan filament here, certainly still hanging out, defying gravity with the suspension of magnetic fields. Here's the southeastern limb, where we saw some spectacular coronal mass ejections, which we streamed yesterday live on Twitch. And you can find the Twitch channel in the description below the video. We stream live regularly for extended periods of time because we always want to see the fascinating footage. Here's a great close-up of that new sunspot. It is huge. It is magnetically complex. And don't be surprised to see it produce additional solar flares, or be associated with additional solar flares, we'll say. And here's the northeastern limb. Let's also take a look at SDO intensity grams. So some major growth of this sunspot in the north. Some minor growth of this sunspot down here. Some umbral migration. A setting group down here will be punctuated by a rising group over here. So you'll see the magnetic field rising. Here's the SDO magnetogram. Again, this group down here, that is indeed a sunspot already. We'll show you high-res imagery of that later in the video. Today's featured product, by the way, is Do Not Pole Vault the Caldera. So no matter how bad times seem, folks, don't worry. They can get worse, but they will get better. So our finest days lie ahead. Remember, when you hear somebody speak, you're less likely to remember what they talked about than how they made you feel. So don't pole vault the caldera. If you're going through hell, keep going. Because again, our finest days lie ahead. So if you're going on a volcanic vacation, leave your vault pole at home and do not pole vault the caldera. Do check out our designs below the video. You'll find them in the description to the Redbubble shop. They'll show you the products in order of best selling. Here's a quick rundown of those. Thanks to everybody who's picked up merch, and congratulations on surviving a global scamdemic so far. You could also support the channel because reasons on Patreon. Since we're paid just this side of nothing to put out the content, barely anybody sees the videos on YouTube. They're as much a resource for us as they are for anybody else. You can also support the channel via the Smash Team. Yes, the Smash Team. And thanks for leaving comments, Mike Bordages and TinMan1057. Smashomash.com/Smash Team is our own subscription services site. So check that out. If you haven't, click posts to see the latest. Sign up for email alerts if you aren't getting notifications about our latest video releases. You can also find links to our social media if you want to send me an instant message or participate in future chats. Click the permanent invite link to the Discord channel right there. You need an invite to join a Discord channel. That's a permanent link right there on smashomash.com/Smash Team. And yeah, thanks to our Smash Team members, especially Gold and Silver and Gold Annual paid-up subscribers. There's also a Bronze level. And again, we do send out email alerts because of some terrible performance of certain types of websites. Next, check it out. We've got Merapi here showing a pyroclastic flow. there is a reason to heed the warnings about not hanging out around volcanoes, because you don't want to be caught in one of those. Pyroclastic flow is not an optimal way to go. Let's see what else is erupting. Turns out Etna is erupting, and indeed producing some new lava effusion. Shivaluch exploding, flight level 220 over the Kamchatka Peninsula. That's a 22,000-foot altitude plume of volcanic ash. Chikaratsky also exploding, flight level 130. That's over Paramushir Island, 13,000-foot ash plume. 14,000-foot ash plume over Paramushir Island from Abiko. Yeah, Abiko. Sakurajima also exploding, flight level 060. 6,000-foot ash plume over Kyushu, Japan. Subanose-jima, located in the Ryukyu Islands, producing a 5,000-foot ash plume. And there's the rundown on Merapi, a blackened ash flow, which is a hot avalanche of lava particles and ash. Don't be in one of those. It makes for a bad day. Also, Carinci now back on the list on the Isle of Sumatra. Carinci exploding, flight level 130 from Carinci, flight level 210 over central Mexico as a result of Popocatépetl explosive activity. Fuego in Guatemala exploding, flight level 150. Nevado de Ruiz exploding, flight level 220. It's a 22,000-foot ash plume over Colombia. Also, Sangay in Ecuador exploding, flight level 190, 19,000-foot ash plume. Sabancaya in Peru, intermittent emissions of volcanic ash. And Villarrica, elevated strombolian activity continuing in central Chile. Volcanic alert level remains at yellow with 500-meter exclusion zone around the main crater. Next, looking at seismicity, and of course the most earthquakes in the world have occurred in central Turkey over the past 24 hours, as they've experienced a loss of nearly 10,000 lives in the country of Turkey, following a 7.8 and a 7.5 magnitude earthquake. Since then, it's been pretty calm here, seismically speaking, over most of the rest of the world, although there has been a 5.4 in Micronesia. So lots of aftershocks there in Turkey. We won't keep covering aftershocks. Micronesia also had a 5.2. Turkey had a 5.3. So you'll see a long list today. If you look at your USGS list, 5.4 also occurred in the Solomon Islands. And just scrolling up the list here, we'll report anything over a 5 magnitude, like this 5.4 in Turkey and this 5.0 in Indonesia. That just came in at 11:35 Universal Time, and let's get back to space. It's where the action is ramping up once again. So lots of people calling themselves solar forecasters, utterly incorrect about what's been going on with the sun. We love it. It's just facts. That's the last 24 hours in SDO 171 angstroms. And let's take a close-up look at that new rising region. That is a major sunspot group. It's already at least beta-gamma class. Again, we'll show high-res imagery of that later in the video. For your viewing pleasure. The 10.7 centimeter radial flux now all the way up to 185 solar flux units. So you can expect a major increase in the sunspot number and the radial flux. The radial flux should be toying with 200 at least later today. And the sunspot number should be pushing up to about 170, something like that. Keep in mind we do have a setting region in the west. I think the rising region in the east is larger. Anyway, that's the current state of affairs. That's the one-year graph from Solon.info. The black line is the radial flux, and the red line is the sunspot number. Next, looking at the Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard. No geomagnetic storms or geomagnetic unrest forecasted. We do expect to see a minor CME impact, and with the incredibly diffuse solar wind that we're seeing at the moment, it may be a thing. But at the moment, no major upticks here. Again, we are expecting to see a minor, diffuse, stealthy CME impact sometime between now and later today. So don't be surprised to see a little signal there from that likely incoming coronal mass ejection component. KP index here just on the low side of geomagnetic unrest, KP 3.67. And let's take a look at Earth's magnetic moment from space. Now, the Discover spacecraft is detecting some extremely diffuse solar wind. So here over the last 4 hours, you'll see some very large variations there in the magnetohydrodynamic pressure, namely very small magnetohydrodynamic pressure. Again, that is a result of the solar wind density being very low. The solar wind speed is quite high. Here's Earth's magnetic moment from the ground for the past 4 hours. You can expect to see huge variations in that as well. And it'll all make more sense when you see the real-time solar wind. So here is your real-time solar wind. You can see this sudden drop-off here, suggesting that it might be errors. And that is all the Discover. The blue line down there indicates that it's a Discover. Solar wind density here allegedly going from 13 protons per cubic centimeter to 0.3 protons per cubic centimeter, and even lower than that at some points, as low as a quarter of a proton per cubic centimeter. 0.23. So very, very low readings there at Lagrangian point 1, where the Discover is located orbiting that gravitational point. Solar wind speed nearly 600 kilometers per second. So it's a fast and very diffuse solar wind as measured by the Discover. We also did see a dip in the plasma temperature there. Anyway, that data looking a little bit erroneous. Let's see if there's a switch over soon. We'll be monitoring this throughout the day to see if it switches over to the ACE. Next, looking at magnetic data. So here are your GOES magnetometers over the past 3 days. Fairly smooth there, despite a coronal hole high-speed stream. And it's looking like a glancing blow from the coronal hole high-speed stream, in my opinion. But there are your lower highs and higher lows from the GOES magnetometers. And let's take a look at the heliospheric current sheet, as there is a sector boundary crossing coming later today, most likely. You can expect to see a North Pole current sheet by the time we create tomorrow's daily space weather video. North Pole current sheet shown here in green. South Pole current sheet shown here in red. And if you know how to read this top view ecliptic plane field plot data, it's one of the best predictive data sets that we have. We can even forecast what will happen with things like the GOES magnetometers and so on by understanding this data right here. So what happens when you immerse yourself in the data, folks? You start to understand how the physics relates. And let's take a look at the line of sight field plot next. So we are about to leave the South Pole and enter the North Pole in terms of plasma polarity. Here you can see the B field kind of turning away there. That's in some ways the solar magnetic equator at the moment, as we have fairly organized fields here. North Pole current sheet coming in. Next line of sight coronal hole plot. And these latest coronal holes rotating in are of North Pole orientation. Let's take a look at that from SDO 211 angstroms wavelength. So these coronal holes over here are North Pole oriented. They will become more well-defined in the coming days. Remember, folks, the corona is very bumpy, so it has a tendency to obscure coronal holes until they're a little bit more Earth-facing. Which brings us to sunspots. So this sunspot up here, 3213, has been the major producer of flares. As a result, it is remaining the most likely place for major flares, as you see on our flare probability monitor. And also, don't be surprised to see major flares from this setting group down here and this rising group over here. So, very high likelihood of additional major solar flares. Yesterday, you'll notice, if you watched yesterday's video, you may have noticed that we said there's a significant likelihood of M or even X-class flares. Well, we almost got to an X-class flare. And let's take a look at sunspots here in some SDO composite. There's 171 angstroms plus SDO continuum. Let's zoom in a little bit. And let's lose the 171 angstroms. There's some great high-res imagery for you. And let's move to relativistic particles and solar flares. Now, sometimes a solar flare is associated with particles showing up at a very high rate of speed, which hang out in the Earth's polar regions, in Earth's field-aligned currents, and those cause radio blackouts because of their Bremsstrahlung, their breaking radiation. That attenuates the ionosphere up at the poles. At the moment, we ain't got nothing going on like that. No spikes in the proton flux, but some big spikes in the GOES X-ray flux. So a quick reminder, folks, don't get solar flares and coronal mass ejections confused. We hear silly channels on YouTube saying this all the time. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections are different things. Solar flares are photons of the X-ray variety. Coronal mass ejections are primarily protons, hydrogen nuclei. Of course, there are some other heavier elements in there like helium, electrons, and other heavier particles, but don't get flares and coronal mass ejections confused. It's a common thing we hear. We see it in science articles, and we hear YouTube channels incorrectly stating that they are the same thing. They are separate phenomena, is my point, and we'll get to coronal mass ejections here in a moment. Largest flare was right at 2300, and it was an M6.39 class flare, pushing the boundaries of an X-class flare there. So let's take a look at the last. This is actually just yesterday in 94 angstroms. And let's zoom in a little bit on this. As we relish our position of providing the most detailed imagery in the world of the closest star, thanks for stargazing with us. Don't worry, we've got some more spectacular images here, like 94 plus 131 angstroms for the past 24 hours. Let's take a close-up look right after 131 angstroms by itself. Again, of this new active region. That's some great imagery as well. So that sunspot group will definitely get a name today. It might be counted as nearly 100 sunspots, so expect a major uptick in the sunspot number, and probably also a continued uptick in the radio flux today. So that's sort of a bit of a forecast. That's 94 plus 131 angstroms. And let's move on. Let's step back and take a look at what's going on overhead over Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. We've got moon set at the western ecliptic, and we've got sunrise with a Saturn chasing the sun there. So Saturn should be visible right after sunset. Let's show a solar system forecast to help orient our viewers to things like coronal mass ejections. Anyway, this is where things are now. Let's advance it 1 week. Here's where things will be on the 15th. A crescent waning moon is the phase we'll have. And let's take a look at coronagraphs. You're probably wondering if we have Earth-directed coronal mass ejections. We'll answer that here in just a moment with some additional imagery from Stereo A, located here at Lagrange 5, and Soho Lascaux C3 here at Lagrange 1. So we paused this here at 2306 for Soho and 2309 for Stereo A. Why? Because we have this great little southern ejection happening. And guess what we don't see? We don't see anything down the earthly line. So if you're a new viewer, you may not be aware that Earth would be off in this orientation from Stereo A. What a crappy looking arrow that was. Oh my gosh, I'm about to throw my mouse. I'm about to hit my mouse with a hammer. How about that? Yeah, support the channel. We need new hardware. Not just peripherals. I'm talking about a lot more hardware. Anyway, we'll just let this play through briefly. That's 90 frames from Stereo A and from Soho Lasco C3. And, well, none of those coronal mass ejections are earthly directed. And thanks for leaving a comment. Also, Robert. So that's what's going on. Here are some 24-hour videos. There's SDO 304 angstroms plus the Soho coronagraph C2 and C3. Yeah, those CMEs are not earthly directed. They might look like halos, some of those, but they're all separate events, and they're either on the far side or well off of the north-south Earth line. Some great imagery here. And yes, indeed, it is getting quite exciting to see that there is a long way to go to reach the peak of solar cycle 25. It's not at solar maximum. Every indication is that it's not at solar maximum, and no matter how many YouTube channels out there tell you that it is, it doesn't change the facts of reality. Next, looking at our ground-based solar observatory here at Cerro Tololo, Chile. And we need names for some filaments. So we've got the Hulk Hogan filament right here. We've got the Tom Holland filament up here. And these two filaments here need names, especially this one, because it's very well defined and it's right in front of an active region. So we could find this hurled through space toward your back door at any moment. So we invite you, as we bring up the latest frame here, to join us on Twitter in order to name that filament, an important feature of space weather. Filaments, they are what gets ejected during coronal mass ejections. And of course, sometimes we see a coronal mass ejection come out of a sunspot and we don't even see a filament there. It's often because of a lack of contrast. But in any case, when we do see filaments, the likelihood of those ejecting is quite high. By the way, if you're looking for free samples for mushroom gummies, you can find that on the Twitter page as well. Thanks to everybody who's picked up product from our new great affiliate/sponsor, Hemp Lucid. Links below the video to the Hemp Lucid shop to save some cash. There's also a Valentine's Day sale going on. Bundle and save. We'll get to it here in a moment. Here's the last 24 hours from SDO 304 angstroms. And how about a little close-up of this new spectacular sunspot group? We were surprised to see early in yesterday's Twitch stream, which we typically start after our YouTube premiere, by the way. We were surprised and amazed to see this major coronal mass ejection and plasma event happening. Exciting stuff. That's the past 24 hours from SDO, and let's look at the past about 2.5 hours from the GO 16 SUVI. So there's that fantastic wide field of view. And look at all the plasma filaments down here. Huge prominences here in the eastern equatorial region and the southeast. Likelihood of coronal mass ejections and major flares, nearly 100%. By the way, that brings us to our bonus feature segment where we'll talk about satellite charging hazards. We do see some charging hazards here in the Pacific Ocean. They're of the surface charging variety caused by low-energy electrons which build up on the outside of satellites. Some significant surface charging hazards happening there in the Central Pacific, north of the equator. Next, the GOES electron flux here, and we're seeing it, at least the GOES 16 here, just making it into warning levels, and the GOES 18 pushing it as well as it reaches 1,000 pulse flux units. Or in this case, it's 1,000 particles per centimeter negative squared. Goes electron flux here, surprisingly high despite a coronal hole high-speed stream. So surprisingly diffuse coronal hole high-speed stream as well as high electron counts, higher than expected. So NOAA and I largely agreed on this. We expected it to be a little bit lower. They've revised their forecast, expecting an uptick here in the electron flux. Again, looks like a glancing blow from that coronal hole high-speed stream, as far as I can tell. There's the one-year graph of the relativistic electrons as measured by the GOES 16 and now GOES 18. That one-year graph is available at solon.info. And let's take a look at the layer of the atmosphere where that gets measured, the F layer of the ionosphere. So we'll show the vibrational frequency and the anomalygram as we've got some significant anomalies continuing, especially around South America. So that's of little surprise as the South Atlantic anomaly has now snapped back into place over the South American continent right about here. And you see these big variations happening in the ionosphere there, an indication that the South Atlantic anomaly has returned to the South American continent. Here's the anomalygram. It'll be even more obvious that it's right about where my pointer is. And huge low-frequency and high-frequency anomaly variations happening around that area. Also some significant variations happening around the African anomaly, which is somewhere south of the equator. I believe it's right near the equatorial west coast of Africa, right about there. A more minor anomaly in the ionosphere. We'll let it play through one more time and bring up the latest image. And then we'll show you the most likely places to see GPS errors. An important feature of space weather. So there's the latest image, 1300 universal time ionogram, and there's 1300 universal time anomalygram. The total electron content shows the free electrons between your GPS satellite and your handset. Feel free to pause the video on this frame. Here is your total electron content forecast. And we can expect to get this a little bit more organized here as we're seeing electrons reach a more nominal operating range here. You can expect to see this a little bit more organized. So tomorrow when we show this, it will not be quite as anomalous as it is now. Huge GPS errors expected over North America and so on. It is wintertime up here in North America. So anyway, that's your total electron content forecast. Here is your latest imagery of the closest star. Let's first take a look at this sunspot group since it's produced some significant flares, a nearly X-class flare. And that is a beta gamma delta class sunspot group all day. You see these magnetic fields very close to each other and all mixed up. North and south polarity there, all hanging out in the same zone. That is the recipe for large solar flares. Next, we'll look at this new rising group because it is quite promising. And it is certainly beta gamma class. Too early to tell if it's beta gamma delta class or not. And do we have another new sunspot group over here? Another new sunspot form there as well. So again, expect an uptick in the sunspot number today, an uptick in the radio flux, and likelihood of major solar flares and significant coronal mass ejections. And before we move to our meteorology segment, again, there are links below the video to our Hemp Lucid shop. Check that out. People are loving the products. And we're delighted that you received your gummies, Robert. If you do visit the link on Twitter, you'll note that it's free shipping. It doesn't even require a credit card to get samples of the gummies. They are fantastic. And we'll have to do more videos about the testing of those. Of course, you can find all kinds of other products there, like the most popular, the water-soluble CBD tincture. Less filling, tastes great, depending on what your tastes are. And of course, you've got solutions there for stress, immune response, sleep, focus, etc. You can find links on the homepage as well as below this video. So help us out with clicks at smashomash.com. Visit us on social media, etc. We built our homepage back in 2019 in response to pathetic and putrid censorship by a company now known as Meta. If you've got a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find the content, and I guarantee you can, hire the Smash Team. All right, so let's get into the realm of meteorology here. First, take a moment to press like and subscribe. Visit our playlists if you haven't seen them. There are gaming videos, interviews, and shout-outs. Don't forget the 12 Days of Smashmas. You don't get to see my liked videos. That's private. Perhaps check out our Terms Defined playlist, or Ownage Food and Drink. By the way, we've put up a new forum topic as well. If you haven't checked out the Smash-O forum, there's a new forum topic there, Ultra Healthy Eats. Check that out, and let's move to the realm of meteorology. Bridging the realm of space and Earth weather. So right now we're looking at the likely locations of the Aurora Australis. That's what's going on at the South Geographic Pole. And it's a little bit brighter at the north. The Aurora Borealis. Pretty bright here over places like Siberia. One of the many great features of nullschool.net is that it will show you the likely places for the aurora. Just click on the space and you can see what's going on. Anyway, here are the wind currents on planet Earth. These are the jet streams of the eastern world. We've got a strong upper-level anticyclone up here. That is a high-pressure zone in the upper level there, right at the North Geographic Pole. That is a high-pressure zone, essentially a pressing down on the atmosphere. That's what a high-pressure zone is. And these are the surface winds of this side of the planet. Two strong lows there, both northwest and northeast of Australia. Here are the surface winds of this side of the planet. And here are the jet streams. Quite chaotic jet streams in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere around the western world. Jet streams in the central world looking like this. And these are the surface winds. Strong winds there in the North Sea once again, making it a tough day for Viking raids. Continuing on, we want to see what the clouds and fog situation over the Americas is looking like. So that's what's going on. In 3.9 nanometer infrared radiation over Crescent Earth. And I'm surprised we haven't seen more comments about Crescent Earth comments. I mean, it's, yeah. All right, so here is our weather.gov map. If your location's lit, click your location. We've got some heavy rains. We'll show you some forecasts. There is the key. Again, if you're in a colored spot on the map, head to weather.gov and click your location. Those are too many counties for us to cover. Let's take a look at some forecasts. First, temperature anomaly. We've got some warm temperatures in most of the east of the country here. It's a great respite following some incredibly cold, some record-breaking cold temperatures. That's your 72-hour GFS temperature anomaly forecast in degrees Celsius. We'll also show the pressure and precipitation forecast. We've got a strong low developing here over eastern Texas. That's going to hang out for a minute and then be off to the races to the northeast. It's on a collision course with Detroit and Chicago, and indeed Lake Huron. That's your 72-hour GFS pressure and precipitation forecast. Here's your GFS 72-hour total accumulated precipitation forecast. And that is showing over 3 inches of rain there for large portions of Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Illinois. Also Georgia and South Carolina. Expecting some significant rains there. And let's just show our viewers another great feature of windy.com. So, of course, there's always stuff about meteorology in the news, because people are always talking about droughts and, global warming and global cooling and all kinds of other propaganda. And so we've got all these great features here, like drought intensity. Check it out. There's the drought intensity map. Here's the moisture anomaly map. And interestingly enough, we're seeing kind of dry conditions in portions of Michigan, portions of Iowa. And it should put down a marker here. I don't know what's up with that. Moisture anomaly. It's going to show like, well, maybe it's not going to show jack shit. I don't know what's going on here. Hello? Could you function? I guess not. There we go. Moisture anomaly. So it's quite dry here in western Iowa. They're like an inch, 1.25, 1.3 inches behind as far as their rainfall here at the moment. And some respites happening in other portions of the country there. Of course, we've got some droughts in Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. Significant droughts there. Also, droughts in parts of Michigan. So, just one of the many features there of Witty.com. They got a great mobile app. Perhaps download that to your junkware device, your Apple or Android, quote, smart, and quote, phone. You know, those barely functional things that allow you to access nearly all of the information ever known to mankind, yet it's utterly censored and broken like the entire internet itself. Here's your lightning mapper. Significant thunderstorms there over eastern Texas. And I think we've got some terrestrial strikes here around Dallas. Indeed we do. Northwest of Waco there. Southwest of Fort Worth. Looks like there is some thunder rolling in there. Next time you hear thunder, check it out, lightningmaps.org. There should be thunderclaps propagating there. I'm not sure why it's not showing them. Did I change something? Thunder is off because reasons. Of course, I didn't turn it off. Anyway, that will show you the propagation of likely thunderclaps. One of the many great features of lightningmaps.org. Anyway, there are some terrestrial strikes there, mainly around East Texas. Here's your full view map. And it's time to close this thing out with U.S. Doppler radar and some satellite imagery. So there is your U.S. Doppler. There's the full 50-state view. Here is the lower 48. That is the State of the Union, if you could call it that. The alleged union of states. Former nation, now banana republic. Here is clouds and fog. You can see rapid cloud nucleation happening there over East Texas. And here is the water vapor map. Again, rapid evaporation happening there, and you've got this high pressure air and this low pressure forming here. And this other high pressure air is sort of constraining this moisture into this passageway. So that'll help to steer that moisture up to the northeast. And we would steer you to the like button. If you haven't thumbs upped this video, please do. If we get 50 likes, we will do a live stream on YouTube. That is the new goal, 50 likes. We got to 47 a couple of days ago. If we get to 50 likes, we'll do a live stream on YouTube. So make sure you press like if you haven't, because without 50 likes, we ain't streaming live to YouTube. But with 50 likes, we are. So if you've got questions you'd like to ask, if you haven't pressed like, please do so. We've been seeing many more than 50 views and many less than 50 likes. So that was clouds and fog. Here is water vapor to close things out. Thanks for tuning in to the Smash News Network. Least busted name in news. Congratulations on realizing the channel exists. Again, we are surprised that you've found us. In the meantime, I've been your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-O-Mash, signing off. Thanks for leaving a comment, Cookie Spacey, and may that solar wind be at your back.